When Karoline Leavitt sat down for what she believed would be a standard political debate, she had no idea that within hours the conversation would ignite a media firestorm, cost a veteran journalist his career, and spark a national conversation about bias, free speech, and cancel culture. What unfolded live on air was not just another heated exchange. It was a moment that would define media accountability in the digital age. The setting was The Morning Current, a well-known political talk show famous for its sharp debates and no-nonsense hosts. Paul Danning, a veteran journalist with decades of experience, had built his career on pressing his guests, challenging their views, and keeping a firm grip on the direction of the conversation. That morning, he expected to do the same with Karoline Leavitt, a rising conservative voice known for her staunch views on media bias. The interview began as expected. Danning took a confrontational stance, accusing conservative outlets of spreading misinformation, while Karoline countered with evidence of mainstream media selectively shaping narratives. Their exchange, though tense, remained within the realm of typical political debate until it wasn't. Danning's frustration began to show. His tone sharpened, his words became more pointed, and then came the moment that would change everything. "People like you," he said, his voice laced with frustration. "You push this fake narrative of victimhood, pretending conservatives are being silenced when, in reality, you're the ones silencing everyone else." A hush fell over the studio. Karoline remained composed, but the tension in her eyes was unmistakable. She had encountered tough interviewers before, but this was different. Calmly, she responded, "Excuse me?" Danning didn't back down. He pressed on. "You act like free speech is under attack, but what you really want is control. Your people." He stopped mid-sentence, realizing too late the weight of his words. The shift in the atmosphere was palpable. Producers exchanged nervous glances. Crew members stiffened. Karoline, in contrast, remained poised. She let the moment hang in the air before responding with surgical precision. "Would you like to clarify what you mean by your people?" The question was simple, but it cut through the noise like a knife. The phrase "your people" was ambiguous enough to be interpreted in many ways, and in a time where public perception shapes reality, the implications were damning. Danning hesitated. A second too long. The cameras were rolling and the internet was watching. He tried to recover. "I meant conservatives. People like you who push an agenda of grievance instead of progress." But the damage was already done. Karoline seized the moment. "So, just to be clear," she said evenly, "when you said your people, you weren't referring to anything beyond political ideology?" Danning's lips pressed into a thin line. He saw the trap. If he denied any alternative meaning, he risked appearing defensive. If he admitted a mistake, he looked weak. Instead, he shifted tactics. "Oh, come on, Karoline. Don't play the victim here." He chuckled dryly. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I meant. But instead of engaging in the actual debate, you'd rather twist my words." But Karoline wasn't going to let him shift the goalposts. "I don't need to twist anything, Paul. Your words speak for themselves." And then came the final blow. Frustrated, Danning snapped, "Maybe if conservatives spent less time playing the victim and more time actually contributing something to society, we wouldn't be having this conversation." The silence that followed was suffocating. Within minutes, the clip spread like wildfire across social media. A 15-second snippet of Danning's words, "Maybe if conservatives spent less time playing the victim and more time actually contributing something to society," was all people needed. No context, no prelude, just that sentence, shared and dissected by millions. Hashtags began trending. "Fire Paul Danning," "Media bias exposed," "Karoline was right." Sponsors took notice. By midday, 3 major advertisers had suspended their partnerships with the Morning Current. By evening, 5 more followed suit. What had started as a contentious interview had snowballed into a full-blown media crisis. Inside the headquarters of NBS News, executives scrambled to contain the fallout. The network was faced with a choice: stand by Danning and risk alienating their audience, or cut ties and attempt to salvage their reputation. By 3 p.m., the first official statement was released. Paul Danning has been placed on indefinite suspension while we conduct an internal review. The internet was unsatisfied. Viewers wanted more than a suspension. They wanted termination. And Karoline? She didn't lead the charge, but she didn't stop it either. That night, when asked if she believed Danning should be fired, she responded strategically, "I think people in positions of influence should be held accountable for their words." The next morning, the network made it official. Effective immediately, Paul Danning is no longer affiliated with NBS News. Reactions were swift and divided. To some, this was justice, proof that media figures were no longer untouchable. To others, it was cancel culture at its worst. Right-wing commentators hailed Karoline as the woman who took down Paul Danning. Left-leaning figures, while distancing themselves from his remarks, questioned the precedent it set. And then, Paul Danning broke his silence. In a pre-recorded video posted to social media, he was defiant. "I was fired because I spoke the truth. The media doesn't want truth. They want compliance. If you step out of line, you're gone. This isn't about me. It's about all of us." The video garnered millions of views. His supporters rallied, his critics pushed back, and Karoline? She stayed silent, letting the world argue for her. The controversy surrounding Danning's firing wasn't just about him. It sparked a broader debate about free speech, media accountability, and the power of viral outrage. Had this been a necessary reckoning or a dangerous precedent? Were journalists being held accountable, or were they being silenced for their views? In the end, Paul Danning may have lost his job, but he wasn't gone. Within weeks, he launched an independent show on YouTube, branding himself as a truth teller, silenced by the establishment. Meanwhile, Karoline continued her rise, forever linked to the moment that changed everything. So, what does this mean for the future of media? Was this justice served, or an example of cancel culture gone too far? And most importantly, who decides what crosses the line? One thing is certain, this won't be the last time something like this happens. And when it does, the question remains, whose side will you be on? As the dust settled, both Paul Danning and Karoline Leavitt found themselves at the center of a shifting media landscape. The fallout from their exchange had far-reaching consequences, not just for them, but for the entire industry. News networks scrambled to reassess their editorial policies, while commentators on both sides of the political spectrum used the incident to bolster their arguments about bias and censorship. Danning's new independent platform gained traction quickly. His YouTube channel amassed hundreds of thousands of subscribers within weeks, fueled by those who saw him as a martyr for free speech. His content was unapologetic, leaning into the very criticisms that had led to his downfall. He framed himself as a truth teller in exile, a voice for those who felt silenced by mainstream media. His supporters rallied behind him, pointing to his firing as proof that dissenting voices were no longer welcome in traditional journalism. Karoline, on the other hand, capitalized on her rising influence. Invitations poured in for interviews, speaking engagements, and panel discussions. She was hailed as a principled conservative who had exposed the double standards of mainstream media. While she avoided direct engagement with Danning's narrative, she remained a key figure in the broader debate about journalistic integrity. Her measured responses and strategic silence only amplified her credibility among her supporters. Meanwhile, NBS News struggled to recover. The backlash from Danning's firing created a ripple effect, prompting internal reviews and a shift in programming strategy. Executives faced increasing pressure to prove their commitment to unbiased reporting. Some within the network feared that the handling of the controversy had alienated a significant portion of their audience. The show, The Morning Current, underwent a format change, bringing in new hosts and adopting a more centrist approach in an attempt to regain trust. The broader implications of the incident continued to unfold. Politicians weighed in, some calling for stronger protections for journalists, while others decried the rise of what they termed mob justice in the digital age. Social media platforms, ever responsive to controversy, implemented new content moderation policies, attempting to balance free expression with the prevention of targeted harassment campaigns. public opinion remained deeply divided. Polls showed a near-even split between those who believed Danning had been justly removed and those who saw it as an overreach. The discourse around media accountability and free speech grew more complex, with no clear consensus on where the lines should be drawn. For both Danning and Karoline, the moment that had upended their careers became a defining chapter in their respective journeys. Their names would forever be linked to the debate that refused to die down. And as the media landscape continued to evolve, one truth became evident. What happened on that morning show was not an isolated event, but a harbinger of battles yet to come. Because in an era where perception shapes reality, where a single sentence can end a career or launch a movement, the question remains, who controls the narrative? In the months that followed, the aftershocks of the incident spread beyond the world of journalism. Politicians used the controversy as ammunition in ongoing culture wars, leveraging it to push their own agendas. Conservative lawmakers proposed new protections for journalists and media personalities who claimed to be victims of ideological bias, while progressive leaders warned about the dangers of misinformation and the need for stricter regulations. Danning's influence continued to grow, with his independent platform attracting sponsorships from brands eager to tap into his dedicated following. He expanded his reach through podcasts, live streams, and guest appearances on other alternative media networks. His rhetoric became sharper, more aggressive, as he positioned himself as the face of the resistance against what he called the mainstream media machine. Karoline, too, saw her career flourish. She launched a book deal, her memoir detailing the inside story of the debate that changed her life. She toured the country, speaking at conservative rallies and media events. Despite her calculated approach, she couldn't escape the association with Danning's downfall. Some saw her as a heroine, others as a political opportunist. Meanwhile, traditional media outlets found themselves at a crossroads. The landscape was shifting, with trust in legacy news organizations at an all-time low. Independent platforms and citizen journalism surged in popularity, challenging the dominance of mainstream networks. The industry scrambled to adapt, experimenting with new formats and engagement strategies to retain viewers. As the controversy continued to dominate headlines, a new question emerged. Was this a one-time scandal, or the beginning of a larger reckoning? The answer remained elusive, but one thing was clear. Paul Danning and Karoline Leavitt had become symbols of a much larger fight, one that showed no signs of ending.